couple of years ago, I don't know if you remember this one, but a few years ago in December of 2020, every news feed on the actual news, but then just everyone's news feed on social media just exploded. People wanted to make sure that you knew that they saw the great conjunction that had happened, this great conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn in the night sky. So at every 400 years, Jupiter and Saturn's orbital patterns, orbital whatever that thing's called, they get close enough that they just pretty much overlap. And about every 800 years, it happens at night, so you can really see it. So you can go look that up. Like, I don't make this stuff up. The Magi, the wise men, these three kings, this is believed to be the exact same star that they saw all those years ago. Okay, most biblical scholars and astronomers agree that the star the Magi saw was actually just the same star that we saw just a few years ago. Well, it looks like one star in the night sky, just this one big star. It's actually Jupiter and Saturn crossing paths, and then it's all contained within this constellation of Pisces. So that's fun. That's a helpful fact for us to know, especially when we read these stories in Scripture. And it's like, this isn't just some fairy tale. There's actually real historical facts and scientific data that backs this sort of stuff up. Fun. The question for us today, though, is why is the arrival of the Magi such a big deal? Why is it such a big deal? Because we get it. It's a nice little story. The three kings show up and bring fat little baby Jesus some great gifts. That's a fun story. Great to tell. But this isn't story time, right? We don't come on Sundays because we need a story time. What is it that is being called to our attention? Why is the arrival of the Magi so important? Why does the church propose this to us? Why does it call it to our attention? And then, very importantly, what does it have to do with my life? The Magi from the East, they represent anyone. They represent all of us. Right? These are men that are searching. They have a great desire within their hearts. They're searching for meaning, for purpose. They're searching for some sort of an escape from this day-to-day life of theirs that can at times seem like it doesn't have much meaning and much purpose. So they're men of hope. They have this burning desire, this longing for something. And then they're searching then, of course, for something. That capital S something that will finally satisfy. It's that line from Augustine that I've shared with you many times. Our hearts are restless until they rest in you. They're searching for that something to really calm their restless heart. So that's what I mean when I say that they're each and every single one of us, because we can all relate to that. We have neighbors that can relate to that. We have friends and family members that can relate to that. We have people literally that live probably 2 blocks away from us that can relate with that. They're searching for something. And then whether they know it or not, they're searching for God. What for centuries, for millennia, we've called God. This ultimate something that can finally satisfy. That's what Augustine's famous line. You've made us for yourself, O Lord, and our hearts are restless until they rest in you. Great. So these Magi, one day in this constant and restless searching, they're looking for a sign. They're looking for anything that can just give them one step forward. And then finally they see it. And what do they see? They see this star, Jupiter and Saturn, coming together in the constellation of Pisces. And then they just drop everything and follow it. I don't know about you. I saw this thing 2 years ago. I can tell you for exactly 0 seconds of my life was I tempted to drop everything in my life and follow it. So what did they see that I didn't? What was it that really drew them forward? Well, for them, they were able to interpret the signs. Back in their day, Jupiter was the great symbol in the heavens and the skies. It was the symbol of the gods, of the kings. Saturn was the planet that symbolized the Jewish people. And then the constellation of Pisces, that was the constellation of the nation of Israel. So you just kind of have to piece it all together, which they did. These people the three Magi, they pieced it all together and they were like, okay, so in the land of Israel, Pisces, among the Jewish people, Saturn, some king, some divine king has been born, Jupiter. And they pieced it all together. So they must have been asking themselves the question, could this king in Israel, among the Jewish people, could this be what we're looking for? Because they had never seen anything like this in the skies. They were astronomers themselves. And so again, only happens about every 800 years, so nobody had seen it for quite a while. They must have seen this and been like, holy smokies, something incredible must be going on. And so they took off. Right? They dropped everything and went in search of what this great astronomical event symbolized to them. And where do you think they would go? If you were going to look in Israel among the Jewish people for a king, where would you go looking? Jerusalem, duh. And you'd go look at the palace. You'd go look at the capital city of Jerusalem, the palace. You'd go knock on the king's door. King at the time was King Herod. So they go knocking on his door. Hey, buddy, congratulations. You must have had a son or something. We've seen his star. It's rising. We've come to do him homage. And Herod goes, what are you talking about? There's no other king. I'm the king. Herod, side note, Herod was a bit of a megalomaniac. He was he's fun. He gets so upset about this. As we know, the story goes on, he goes and kills all of the boys, 2 years and younger. Like, Herod loses his mind. And if you think he just was like being mean to other people, he actually had his own sons killed. He was so worried about losing the kingship. Caesar Augustus said, you can go look this one up too. Caesar Augustus says, it is better to be Herod's pig than it is to be his children. Why? Well, because Herod, as a good little Jew, he's not going to get near pigs. He's not going to touch them. But he was willing to kill his own sons. So, yeah, Herod's fun. Okay. The Magi, again, knocking at the front door. Hey, buddy. So why are they knocking there? Because that's where he should have been. This is where the new king of the Jews should have been. When they rode into Jerusalem, everyone was like, oh, you're looking for the new king of the Jews? I mean, go check the palace. Duh. That's where he's probably at. So they go there, and what happens? They look in the normal place where they should have looked, and they're left empty. Didn't find what they were looking for. So in a last-ditch effort, as it often goes, they go and ask the religious people, and they consult the scriptures. And very quickly they're like, oh yeah, if you're looking for that, it's probably in Bethlehem. Bethlehem is a dumpy little town about 6 miles south of Jerusalem. It's a real dump. Don't tell anybody I said that. But it's just, again, why would you look in Bethlehem? But they do. They go and look. And lo and behold, they find this woman with her newborn son. And all of a sudden, they discover everything. Everything that they were looking for. They find it. So again, the question, why is the arrival of the Magi such a big deal? Why is our attention fixed on them? And the answer to the question is, as it often is, another question. The question is, can you see yourself in them? Again, this isn't Jesus' story time. The question is, can you see yourself reflected in the Magi's search? Can you relate to that? Can you see yourself in them? Like I said, it's each and every single one of us. Everyone in your family, in your neighborhood, in the city, every one of us has that same restlessness in our hearts that the Magi did. Everyone is searching for God. Whether we call it God or not, it's God. We're searching for God. We have to be attentive to that. We need to tune into that restlessness in our hearts and name it. The star that God gives to us to follow, it's not Jupiter and Saturn in the constellation of Pisces. The star God gives to us is our heart. Our heart is what draws us forward. At the church for a long time, they've taught that. Like, the desire for God is written on the human heart. And God never ceases to draw us closer to himself. So this is why, like, any of your family members and friends, people in the city that have fallen away from the faith or say, like, oh yeah, that's not for me, that's where you can kind of just smile and be like, okay. Because they're still a human, which means God is still drawing them to himself. That restlessness is still in their hearts, and you can be confident of that. God never ceases to draw us to himself, and only in God will we find that truth, that something that our hearts are longing for. So then the question is, what do we do? What do we do with that longing? Same thing. We do exactly what the Magi did. We start in good faith. We start following after it. And we go and we look in the places that we should look. We look in the normal places. Just like the Magi did. Just like the Magi then listened to everyone around them, we listen to everybody around us. They're like, oh, you probably need this. You're probably looking for that. And we go start looking in the palaces, so to speak, of the modern world. And I've talked about these many, many times. We start looking in all the normal places people tell us to look. We look for this in romance. We look for this in our jobs and our careers. We look for it trying to make more money, get more stuff, whatever that is. We start looking for this in politics, right? We look in all these normal places that we should find this something that we're longing for. Everyone else is telling us that it is. That's what everyone around us is telling us. Go look for it there. You'll find it. And yet, just like the Magi, We go look there, and we come up empty. Not there. So then maybe in a last-ditch effort, as people often do, we can consult the religious people, we can consult the church and the scriptures. Maybe the scriptures, maybe the church has something to point us to. And maybe the church isn't going to point us to the normal places, but maybe the church will point us to places that are quite normal, places that seem quite ordinary. But perhaps that's the exact same place that we're going to find everything, that we're looking for. The key for us isn't even in the gospel today. It's only implied. Okay, what do we read in the gospel? We're told, when Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, behold, Magi from the east arrived. So that's the key. They arrived, which means they left at some point. They began that journey. They began that pilgrimage towards the Christ child. They dropped everything in their normal day-to-day life. They made this search. They made this desire of their heart. They made this the number one priority in their life. And when they did that, right, that's the key. As they began that journey. As I've mentioned before, I'm going to mention it again. I'm very sorry, but this is going to become very apparent. As a parish, we're about to begin a journey of sorts, a pilgrimage of sorts. We're calling that rerouting. Okay, rerouting is a way, again, it's just built into our normal life as Catholics, hopefully. It's a way for us to engage the faith in a very real and practical and applicable way. It's a way to make authentic connections with people you're sitting next to right now, to make connections with them on something other than the weather and sports and politics. Right? Maybe a connection that's a lot deeper than that. And then it's to help us to live this and to walk this path together. Because that's what the Magi show us. That's the example they give to us. Right? They had a very real and very practical path to follow themselves. Hopped on their camels, started going in that direction. Very practical. But they also, what brought them together wasn't sports, it wasn't politics, it wasn't the weather, it was kind of the weather. There's that thing in the sky, but like what brought them together was that something within their hearts, right? That searching they all shared in common, that desire they all shared in common. And then they lived it and they walked it together. Right? They did not do that alone. They lived it together. So, as you also know, I'm leaving for pilgrimage to the Holy Land tomorrow. Right, I'm making a pilgrimage of my own of sorts. But that's what I'm going in search of. Right, that's the question I'm asking as I begin this pilgrimage. Is I want to know, right, what is it that happened to the disciples that they were willing to drop everything and follow him? Like, I want to experience that in a much deeper way as well. I'm asking for that grace of a deeper surrender to the Lord to be able to follow him. But also in this pilgrimage, I'm entrusting this journey we're making here in the parish to the Lord. I'm entrusting that to him, asking that each and every member of our parish, each and every member of our community will encounter the Lord in a new way. We'll discover him in his church and discover that purpose for which they were born. So this is a privileged moment in our parish. Right? This is a privileged moment for us to be able to make this kind of a journey together. We have to decide, though, I'm going to make that journey. That's the key. The Magi could have just sat on their butts and said, that star is really cool. Man, awesome. But no, they hopped on their camels and went, and they made that journey. For us, yeah, we can sit and say, hey, great homily, Father, you did great. Or we can invest a little bit. We can invest a little bit of ourselves, a little bit of our time, and in a very personal way, begin to make that journey ourselves. It's like I mentioned last week, right? We can show up to the church, and yet we can be a million miles away. Our butt can be in the pew, but we're not. This is what this journey is intended to do, right? To make that sort of a journey from it just being something on Sunday to something very intentional that we follow. This following of the Lord in a very intentional way. Because as Augustine says, I said it before, I'm going to say it so many times. As Augustine teaches us, you've made us for yourself, Lord. Our hearts are restless until they rest in you. This journey that we're about to take, just like the Magi, it's this journey to the Lord. Seeking that something that we know our hearts are longing for.